Hello, and welcome to a Purpose-Driven Marriage podcast. We are Duane and Nadine Stewart, and we love any and all things marriage. You've tuned into the right place if you're looking for actionable, practical tips to help you overcome real-life obstacles common to real relationships. We're here to help you strive for a marriage as God has designed it and not as the world has defined it. Because why settle for a good marriage when you can have a great one?
Hello, and welcome to another episode of a Purpose-Driven Marriage podcast. I'm your host, Duane Stewart, and this is my beautiful wife, Nadine.
Hello, hello, hello.
And so we're kind of excited to go part two. We did part one of examining conflict styles, and this is going to be part two where we finish up the conflict styles and then talk about like how to best resolve conflict.
Yeah, so this is our conflict series. And last week, we went over why it happens, the fact that it affects all marriages.
Yes.
And how it's also the single greatest predictor for a successful marriage, how we handle conflict, not how much conflict we experience.
More conflict, the better.
No. No, it's in how we resolve conflict.
Don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of it. It's really just having confidence that you can actually handle it together as a couple.
Exactly. So if you have not had the opportunity to listen to last week's episode, you'll want to go over there and listen to that first.
Yes.
And then continue on to this one.
Yes.
Because last week we also went over the first three of our conflict styles. And we talked about how conflict styles are really just the default way in which we show up in our relationships when we are dealing with conflict.
Right.
And there's no best way, right? There isn't one that's better than the others. However, when we describe it, you see that there's some characteristics of some of the conflict styles that sound better. Yes. Like I chose one. I'm
Collaborator.
Like, yeah, if I could be any one of these, I want to be the collaborator. Now, it also means, I'm not resolving conflict quickly.
Yes.
But hey, I'm thinking about it from a win-win situation.
At least my needs are heard.
Exactly. So there are no best ways, but we do have one that we tend to default to. Yeah. However, we have the ability to be able to pull in any of those conflict styles depending on the needs of the relationship in the situation in that moment. And so the first three that we went over last week were, what were they, honey?
They were the competitor, it was the collaborator, and then the avoider.
Yep. Competitor, collaborator, and avoider.
Yeah. So next up, we're going to talk about the compromiser, which is probably exactly what you think it is. Is that person that really seeks to find the middle ground. Like, where can we meet somewhere in the middle so that everybody can have a little bit of what they want? Like in every argument and disagreement, that's kind of how they think. But they're good listeners. They really try to respect and understand their partner's opinions, and they just want equity and fairness in the relationship. That's really what like a compromiser tries to do. They're like, hey, if we can win, if both of us can win in this situation, that's satisfying. And I think that's going to be a benefit to both of us. But they really focus on making concessions. It's really about examining, hey, this is where I'm at. This is where you're at. We absolutely cannot figure out this deal or come to a resolution where we are right now. Can we come closer to the middle? Let's find another place where we can kind of give up a little bit of what we want, but also get something that we want in order to come to a fair resolution to this situation.
Yeah, and the good thing about this conflict style is that their focus is also still a win-win, right? Which is good because as we talked about, if it's a win-lose situation, even if one wins, if the other loses, the relationship loses. But a win-win scenario, the relationship wins.
Yes.
And, this could be a good approach. However, for the compromiser, because they require each of them to give up something, it may not truly resolve the issue because they may end up feeling unsatisfied, right? Like an example that we had talked about for this was if the issue that they're trying to solve is where we're going to go have dinner. So you and I decide we're going out to dinner and you want to go get Mexican food. Right? And I want to go get Thai food. They're completely different from each other. A compromiser would probably suggest, well, how about we go to neither one of those places and we go to a third option, like let's go get steak.
Yes.
And so we both gave up what we wanted and opted for a third option, which neither one of us may really have wanted, but we're compromising.
You know what? Yeah. So at least you go eat something good. Get a steak, get some chicken or fish or whatever. But yeah, I guess the challenge with that one is, Nadine, is what if you're dealing with somebody that doesn't want to move in that direction? You know what I mean? They're like, I want Mexican, and that's what I want, right? Yeah. That is probably the challenge with being a compromiser when the other person is not willing to compromise. So a compromiser really is depending on the other person that they're dealing with to also have the same mindset. That, okay, if you're giving up a little bit, then I'm going to do a little bit of that too, and we'll figure this thing out.
Well, I think that's why self-awareness is so important. You know, taking this quiz, I think, would be very beneficial for couples. So it's not just one taking it, but both of you taking the quiz and really getting a good understanding of what your default conflict style is. Because then if you know that you have a tendency to be a compromiser or to be a competitor or whatever it might be, you know that there are also other ways that you can approach this conflict, right? Just because you have a default doesn't mean that's the only way to go about doing things. Right. And so if your natural tendency is not to compromise, right? But instead, maybe you're a competitor and to you, it's a win-lose situation. Well, for the sake of the relationship, because ultimately that's what we're trying to preserve, right? Is the relationship.
Right.
Make some changes.
Right.
Don't stick with it. If you know that's not going to work for that particular conflict, then make some changes, make some adjustments.
And you know what I was thinking is that it's very, very likely that you and your spouse are going to be different in how you resolve conflict. And in a lot of ways, they're going to complement each other. Right? They could cause more conflict if you don't really recognize and embrace the style that you use or lean towards, but you can also be a benefit if you say, oh, you know what? My husband is a collaborator and I'm an avoider. So let's take some of the good things from being a collaborator and him taking some good things from being an avoider and kind of mesh those together so that you can actually have a nice mix of ways to resolve it.
Well, you know what you're describing, honey, and it actually goes hand in hand with resolving conflict is good communication.
Yeah.
Right? It's hard, really, really hard to be good at resolving conflict in a way where it leads to greater intimacy and resolution if you can't communicate.
Yeah.
So you have to learn how to communicate with one another.
Yes.
Right? You have to be empathetic to the needs of your spouse. And it can't just all be about you. You can't say, well, this is my default conflict style, so this is how I'm always going to be, and this is it. Right? You can't do that. Right? This is simply allowing you to be aware of what you have a tendency to do so that you can make adjustments as necessary for the benefit of the relationship.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, the healthiest couples are those that are trying to outserve one another. And what that essentially means is that we are each trying to identify each other's needs.
Yes.
I'm trying to figure out what it is that you need so that I can show up for you in that way. And you're trying to figure out what I need so that you can show up for me in that way. And so that communication and really being able to not just say what our needs are, but being able to be attuned to the needs of our spouse is so key.
Yeah.
Is so key.
That's an important piece because there are so many times when we are focused on us and getting our needs satisfied, which communicating that is an important piece to it. But understanding what your wife, what my spouse, what your needs are is probably more important, because if I'm able to really garner where you're at, right, and what your desires are, and really focus on how I can serve you and make you happy and provide satisfaction within our relationship, and I'm able to do that in a consistent manner, then you'll be motivated to do the same thing on my behalf. And if that is how our relationship goes, then you know what? We're in a good place.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move on to our next conflict style.
Accommodator.
It's our last one. Accommodator. What does that mean, honey?
Well, an accommodator is one that is just kind of a peacemaker, finding common ground. They're keeping the relationship running smoothly. They're kind of like that natural peacemaker, the one that just says, hey, we got this challenge going on. I want to make sure that we put ourselves in a place where we're at peace. So they're listening, right? They're really good listeners, and they're really trying to get in, see and understand what the challenge is with everyone that's involved, and try to find some sort of conclusion that will create peace within the relationship.
You know what accommodators remind me of? Moms.
Yeah.
They are, I think as I put in the quiz, they are like a warm blanket on a chilly day. They are like a diplomat, one that's always trying to smooth over ruffled feathers.
Yeah.
They're the sacrificial type. They'll forgo their own needs to meet the needs of other people. And so that's why when I was looking at what accommodators are, I couldn't help but picture moms. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of accommodating dads too, so please don't write in. But it's just me coming from my perspective and what I have the tendency to do for you, for the children. It's really accommodating your needs.
Yes.
And the tough thing about being an accommodator is you're often forgoing your own.
Yep.
You can end up being like a doormat, right? Someone that ultimately can end up feeling taken for granted.
Yes, because you're sacrificing your needs for the benefit of other people. And if that other person is not really recognizing that piece of it and then acknowledging, hey, you know what, I kind of stepped in your direction so that you can have some peace or be satisfied here, then there's going to be some resentment at some point in time. With that accommodator, there's a limit to how much that accommodator can accommodate.
Yeah, exactly. This is an accommodator is one when we talked about the restaurant scenario. If you wanted to go to Mexican, I wanted to go to Thai food, then the accommodator will, rather than compromising the way a compromiser would do it, or finding a solution that makes both feel satisfied like a collaborator would, an accommodator would just give in and say, oh yeah, sure, let's go to the Mexican restaurant.
Yeah, right.
Even though they had no desire to go to a Mexican restaurant.
Yeah, you're right. And it is difficult. I feel like to be that person, because you always kind of feel like you're thinking about the other person and you're hoping that other person is thinking about you, but it doesn't always work that way. So then there's kind of fear of rejection and just a lack of like assertiveness that builds up over time.
Oh yeah. It's that long-term potential consequence of it turning into resentment.
Yeah.
Resentment where I think we kind of like with the avoider, if you remain passive, it's like holding a fart in for a really long time. Eventually it may come out and you may explode one day, right? Not because of the fart, but because of what you've been holding in for so long, right? And it could also, in daily life, it could look pretty passive aggressive.
Yeah.
Right? Because what they're really essentially communicating and that they're hoping their spouse is sensing is that, hey, have you noticed that I have not tended to my own needs in such a long time because I am tending to yours.
Yeah.
And so I'm accommodating you. I'm accommodating the kids. I'm accommodating anyone. So this person could secretly at some point wish that someone would
speak for them.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. This is, I would guess that people who are accommodators, and this is just a total guess, just me putting two and two together, are also probably the ones that have acts of service as their love language.
Yeah, that's probably true, because acts of service is actually thinking about that other person, whatever they love to see done or to have done, they accomplish that for them. But I'm also thinking too that, because you talked about like the resentment part of it, if you are an accommodator, some of the things that you will probably end up doing to kind of reverse that is be assertive. Just start to build that up over time and speak for yourself. Say no once in a while. You know what I mean? And it actually kind of builds up your confidence to really understand, okay, these are my feelings. Let me go ahead and speak what I'm feeling so that they understand. It kind of reminds me of our dog. We have a little puppy, and our puppy tends to not bark so much. And then she does this little... And then one day she's looking outside the window and she sees some people out there, and all of a sudden this bark comes out. You're like, what happened? Like, you're speaking for yourself? This is awesome. So that swan comes out and they're able to kind of speak their mind, and it's a proud moment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that you've lost yourself. You're still an accommodator, but you now have the confidence to kind of speak your mind and help the other person understand, okay, so I have feelings too. Can you please tend to that as well?
Yeah. And again, it all comes down to communication and expressing that in the right way. And communication isn't just about speaking, but it's for the other partner too, and knowing how to listen. Yeah. Knowing how to truly hear what their spouse is trying to communicate with them. And so we went over the 5 different conflict styles, the 5 different ones that we all have the tendency to default to. And so they were competitor, collaborator, avoider, compromiser, and accommodator. Right? Accommodator was the last one. And so now we're going to switch gears a little bit, because we've talked about how conflict is inevitable in all relationships. Like it happens. We can't avoid it, but it's important that we know how to deal with it when it does happen, that we have a plan in place. We also have talked about how we learn how to resolve conflict is the single greatest predictor for successful marriage. Right. Because ultimately how we learn how to resolve these differences and these areas in our marriage that we may have disagreements about, it can help just substantially increase the level of connection and intimacy in our marriage if we do it right. Right. So how do we do that? Right? How do we do that?
Well, I think there's a few different things that we can do. Number one, avoiding conflict whenever you can is actually a good thing, right? I mean, every situation where there's a disagreement does not require you to have an argument, right? So really trying to understand, okay, does this require a confrontation? Is this something that we should even be talking about? Or is it just small enough for us to say, just leave it, right?
Yeah.
And get a better understanding of that. But if it does require a confrontation, let's start thinking about, all right, well, what is my desired result? Like when I'm now going to speak to my wife about this one thing that we've been dealing with, okay, do I want us to come to a conclusion where everybody's happy, right? Do I want us to kind of resolve it and get over this so that now we can move on and this can be a kind of a win for us in our situation, something that builds confidence that we can handle this again. Thinking about what that desired result is, and then approaching your conversation with that end in mind. Okay, if that's what I want, this is how I need to approach my wife in order to come to a logical conclusion, but also a conclusion where that makes us better as a couple.
Exactly. And so what that looks like, right, is, for example, if there's an issue that I wanted to bring up to you. First of all, I need to make sure that I am approaching you in a loving way with a soft startup, because the way we begin a conversation is the way it will end. There's studies that have shown that in almost 100% of the cases, the way you begin the conversation with your spouse is the way that it will end. So be mindful of that when you're bringing up an issue. Yeah. And then examine your heart. So Duane talked about, what is your goal? Are you bringing up this issue because you're trying to retaliate? Yeah. Right? Are you trying to get back at your spouse about something? You want to just give them another dig? And
that's an easy thing to do while you're in the moment.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think what you're talking about, and I think a practical way to really kind of focus in on this is to step back and say, all right, where's my heart right now? And even if your heart is in the right place, I think the first thing that we should do is come before the Lord in prayer, right? We need to pray, because what the Lord does is he now imparts his heart on you. Now you're kind of embracing the Lord's way of thinking. And when you're thinking through the Holy Spirit and then you approach your spouse, you're going to be doing it in the right way.
Yeah. So when you approach your spouse, you're asking yourself, what's my goal? Am I trying to retaliate? Am I trying to punish my spouse by bringing this up? Is this going to restore our relationship? Is this going to move us towards oneness with one another, or will it create even more isolation and a bigger wedge between us?
Yeah.
Or will this cause peace to happen between us? Am I pursuing peace? Am I truly trying to resolve this so that we can have peaceful communication and possibly potentially grow in our level of intimacy?
Yeah.
Right? Due to this conversation. So you have to ask yourself that, and you have to go in with the mindset that of remembering that your spouse is not your enemy.
Amen. I totally agree with that. And I think, one piece to really think about are your words. Like words are so important in this situation, because it could either build you up or cut you down.
Oh, yes.
And the first few words that come out of your mouth can set the tone for the entire discussion. And there's a verse in Ephesians that talks about just speaking truth, but it says, let no corrupt talk come out of your mouth, but only such as is good to build up your spouse, right? When I just added that in there, but something that may give grace to those who hear. So we really start thinking about, okay, are my words building up my spouse? Are my words providing grace or giving grace to the person that's listening to me? Those are the things that you need to focus on and choose in order to create the environment, but also create the result that you're looking for.
Yes. And, one thing I can tell you that is 100% of the couples that have walked through my practice where their marriages were restored, right? They walked away in love. They're doing well. The intimacy is there again. The connection is there again. 100% of them had personal accountability.
Yeah.
They looked at their contribution to where their marriage is. And so in this situation, when it comes to bringing up an issue or dealing with conflict, it's really important to consider your own contribution to it.
Yeah.
What role did I play?
Right.
What pattern or habit of mine contributed to this conflict? What was it that I was doing again that maybe we've talked about many, many times, that I know upsets my spouse? Like, did I do that again?
Yeah.
Right? Did I play a role in this? Because you have to take some ownership, right? It can't just be
the other person.
Because one thing I say all the time is the quickest path to change is when the change begins within yourself.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to consider, what is it that I did maybe that contributed to it? And when you go into it with that mindset, it kind of softens your heart a little bit because it humbles you. It humbles you.
Yeah.
And then, of course, making sure that the timing is right and your focus is right.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
No distractions. I really love that you said that, because being introspective, reflecting on some of the things that you may have done. It's almost like that verse, like before you take the speck out of somebody else's eye, focus on that log that you got to deal with yourself, right? And I think that's really important, because it gets you thinking about how, fallible you are. Right. You're like, you ain't perfect. I'm not perfect. So don't think that, somebody else is wronging you when you could be a contributor to that as well.
Yes.
Right. So focus on you first. This will be the time when you focus on you before you focus on the other person. Right. I think that's an important piece to understand. So I'm glad you brought that up.
And then, of course, making sure that if you're bringing up an issue, that it comes across as a complaint and not a criticism, because a complaint is really addressing needs or wants are not being met.
Yeah.
And it's in regards to specific behavior. Whereas a criticism is an attack on the person, their character, right? On who they are.
Right.
And so we want to make sure that we're focusing on the right things.
So go ahead.
We're focusing on the problem and not the person.
Yeah.
Because we have this natural tendency to want to put a face to the problem, right? So we have this problem of whatever it might be, like laundry. And so we want to put our spouse's face on that problem when that's not the case, right? Let the problem be the problem.
Right.
And
you guys work together towards...
You guys work together to figure out how to solve that problem side by side, not as enemies.
Yeah. And the thing that came to mind when you talked about criticizing is defensiveness. Like the first thing that came to my mind when you said criticism, because I think about sports, and when you get criticized, all of a sudden you want to defend yourself. And we talked about defensiveness as being one of the four horsemen, right? So that's one thing that you want to avoid. avoid. So if you're the person that's now coming to initiate the confrontation, try to make sure that your approach is not creating an environment where your spouse can be defensive, right?
Yes, absolutely. So again, we're using I statements. We're going in with specifics and facts as opposed to you statements or focusing on, generalizations. And also the goal is really to establish understanding and not a winner and a loser.
Yes.
That is so important.
Yes.
Because I know I've already repeated it like 4 or 5 times on this episode.
It's okay, because I think it should be repeated, because if people are really embracing it and understanding exactly what that means, then I think we're kind of all on the right track.
Yeah. So if you win, the other loses, the relationship loses. So the goal is really a win-win.
Win-win.
Because then the relationship wins. And your goal when it comes to bringing up issues or resolving conflict with your spouse, your goal is really to restore oneness in the marriage. And in order to do that, it may require some forgiveness.
Yeah.
It may require some forgiveness from both of you.
Yeah.
From both of you, because you may both feel wronged in the situation. But forgiving is something that you need to do whether or not the other person has also chosen to forgive, right? Like
because that's something within you that like you're being called, or the Lord is tugging on your heart to say that you need to forgive this person. You're in that place right now. Go ahead and do it.
Yeah. So we just did an episode, I think it's called Sorry, Not Sorry, How to Apologize and Mean It.
Yes.
And so check that out, because that was just a couple episodes ago.
Yeah.
And that will go over the right way to apologize and actually make it effective, actually mean it.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I would say that to help minimize conflict and to resolve it in the right way is choose to bless one another.
Yeah.
Right? Like rather than giving an insult, see if there is something good that you can say about your spouse. One thing, the exercise that I have every single one of my couples do from day one. So the very first session that they attend with me, at the end of that session, they have a homework assignment. Their homework assignment is to think about something they appreciate, admire, respect, or love about their spouse.
Right.
And then meditate on it. And they have to do that for at least 10 minutes every single day. Because when you get into the habit of scanning for positive qualities, for positive characteristics about your spouse, it makes it so much easier to see the good in them. So during times of conflict, you're not as likely to replay this movie trailer of all the horrible things they've done, because you have already rewired your brain to see all the positive that they do.
Right.
And so the time span between when the conflict begins and when the resolution happens is much quicker, because you're seeing your spouse from a very positive light.
Right. Definitely. I love that, because it just changes your mindset. I talk to many people where when you say, hey, how's everything going? Like, how's your marriage going? And the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, she did this or she did that. And I'm like, wow, okay. Let's start thinking about positive things, because I know she did something good too. You know what I mean? Maybe she cooked a great dinner last night, or she did something great for the kids, or, whatever that would be. Think about those positive things, because I guarantee you there are many, many good things that you're not seeing, like you're overlooking, that your wife or your husband is absolutely doing. And they should be praised for it. They should be acknowledged for it.
And I think this is a great place to close this out, because we need to give people a chance to spend that 10 minutes thinking about something they appreciate, admire, respect, or love about their spouse. And there's no better time than now for them to focus on that. So we hope that the last 2 episodes have been helpful in our conflict series. And if you have not had the opportunity to take the quiz to find out what your conflict style is, go ahead and do so. You'll find a link to it in our show notes below, and also on our website. If you guys love this episode, we ask that you consider writing us a review.
Yes.
We
love to see that.
We love 5-star reviews.
Yes.
So please feel free to write us a review. And
the only time I don't like 5 stars is in Thai food. Too hot. I'll take 4. or 3. But when it comes to a comment, give us 5. Mm-hmm.
So we hope that this has been really helpful for you guys. And we'd love to know. We'd love to hear from you. And let us know if these episodes, these podcasts are helping you get one step closer to that purpose-driven marriage.
Yes.
You guys take care. We'll see you next week.